jungle.
Hello, you are listening to Trump Republic Radio. It is April 1st, 2018. I'm your host, Enzo Quesada, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Bobby Astor.
Hello, everyone.
And, it's April 1st. It is April Fool's Day. It is also Easter today, Bobby. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Happy April 1st. Anyways.
I'm kidding with the birthday because it's April 1st. It's not your birthday, it's Easter.
No, but my birthday's coming up soon, so I don't know what you're doing. Today, actually, there is someone's birthday it is today.
Whose birthday
today
is
would have been the 100th birthday of my grandmother.
100th?
She was born April 1st, 1918, so happy birthday, grandmother.
But, I am back in San Marcos to do the podcast. I'm not going to be staying in Missouri as long as I thought I was going to be. I am back in Texas, so it's good to be in person and do this again. We're going to have a good show today. We got to go over, or to begin with, let's go on to what we had first, which is some census stuff.
Yes. In a historic moment for President Trump's administration, Commerce Department Secretary Wilbur Ross has announced that a question asking United States residents if they are American citizens will be placed on the 2020 census. This marks the first time since 1950 that a citizenship question has been asked on the full census, and in doing so will provide a more accurate measurement of how many illegal aliens and non-citizens are in the country. The move also has a huge effect on the redistricting of both Congress and the Electoral College. For instance, California has a population of 39.5 million people, but the Pew Research Center estimates that 2.4 million of them are illegal aliens, making up roughly 6% of the state's population. With 53 current House seats, losing 6% of them on average would mean a decline of 3 House seats, therefore 3 Electoral College votes. In 3 other states, however, Nevada, Texas, and New Jersey, illegal aliens make up more than 5% of each state's total population.
So this is some good stuff because, us counting foreign nationals towards something that is counted towards representation, that's a distortion to where you can just have a big mass of illegal aliens because you don't care about enforcing the law, and you can have a, electoral advantage over other states. You can gain more power by being, corrupt with the system. It's an abuse. So I'm very glad that, we are adding the census question back on qualifying citizenship, because if you're an illegal alien here and you receive the census, you're just gonna do it if it has a question like that.
Exactly. And, if you're only counting actual citizens, which, frankly, you should be only counting actual citizens, just the whole balance of power shifting really is the important thing. Because the census that is taken in 2020, that's the one that changes, for Congress, affect the Electoral College for the 2024 and 2028 presidential elections. So whatever changes are made for the census there in terms of redistricting, that's going to affect the next 2 election cycles after that. Then the 2030 census will then affect, the ones in the 2030s. So it's extremely important going forward that we make sure that we can only count American citizens, so that only American citizens who, are the ones who should be and, are the ones who should only be voting are counted. But, even if they don't even if they continue the way that they're currently doing it and count the illegal aliens, the Electoral College and the redistricting of different states is still going to change, no matter what. And I kind of want to just go over those just real quickly before we move on.
Yes.
There's a map here, and I'm reading this from Fair Votes. It's actually an article back in December of 2016, so, over a year ago, or almost 2 years ago. It was in December, so over a year ago. But they were looking at the different demographic and population trends of different states to show who's actually going to gain and lose seats in the House, and therefore, electoral college votes after the 2020 census. And every state that we don't mention stays the same at whatever number it currently is. So I'm just going to go through the ones that, first off, the following states will lose a seat. Okay, so this is just states losing one seat. No state loses more than two. So the states that are going to lose one is Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois, Alabama, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, and Rhode Island. So all those states are going to lose one House seat. Now, for states like Ohio and Michigan and Pennsylvania, those are states that are swing states that we were able to win. So that will take power away from us if we continue to, keep those states past 2020. The states that are going to gain one seat is Oregon, Colorado, Arizona, and North Carolina. Florida will gain 2 seats, and the only state that will gain 3 seats is our Lone Star state here, Texas. We're actually expected to gain 3 seats. We currently have 36 electoral votes. That will put us at 39. And California, if you're wondering, remains at 55 electoral votes. So it's going to be very important to actually get this, because if you can have California start decreasing, Texas's increase in population and decrease in, not counting illegals, if anything, we might actually just stay the same at where we're at, which proportionally to other states and how this is going to shift around, might actually keep us going pretty well.
Yeah, so electorally for us on the right, this is stuff that should help us going towards the future. Now we have to watch out for any sort of major lawsuits they're going to throw at this thing.
They're gonna do what they can
already
going to
be a
throw
ton.
all the lawsuits.
So we gotta hope we can wade through that, but we're on the right path with what we're doing with these questions. Let's move on to the next thing, though, that we have on the docket for the top of the news, and that is some stuff on the FISA court abuses that we've been talking about for months now.
Yes, we just have a quick little story to talk about this, and that is the DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz has announced that he will be reviewing the potential FISA abuses by both the Department of Justice and the FBI, following requests from Congress and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. So they're going to start looking into it. Just, not really too much to this story, but is a little update on the ongoing situation there. Thought we would include that in the show.
Yeah. Now, I think that we need to, when we're talking about the FISA abuses, we need to paint the picture of how we got to where we are now. Because we've been talking about this issue with these FISA court abuses, I guess since Trump said that he was wiretapped in the White House.
That was January of 2017, right before the inauguration.
And, when he first said that, everyone was like, this is, the least presidential thing a person could possibly do. But now knowing what we know and the process of, the surveillance under Carter Page that, entailed him and then every single person in the Trump campaign that he worked with, or communicated with, because that opens you up for FISA abuse. The approval of these FISA warrants under Comey and Rosenstein and McCabe as well, which it's interesting. All these people are leaving.
McCabe's, he's got his GoFundMe account out there raising legal defense funds, raised, over $500,000 at this point. The guy's worth like 11-something million already.
Yeah.
So.
What we've been able to understand now that's been going on as far as the shadiness in our federal government, in our alphabet agencies, the FBI, the CIA, DOJ, the stuff that was happening under Obama, it feels like we're really getting close to the precipice of the collision course. Now, we're not moving forward really on getting a special probe announced for these FISA courts. That's not happening at the moment. But we are, at least moving on it in some fashion. This is not something forgotten. So I think it's some great stuff. You have any other thoughts on it?
I would just say that, you can't rush these things. It may seem like people take a long time, and a lot of times they are bogged down with lawsuits.
Because this battle has been slow paced.
Yes.
That's why, I wanted to break down some of the events that brought us this. We could do, remember when we did the midweek show over the debunking the Russian narrative?
Should we get our good friend Jesse Ventura back in the show?
at this point, you could possibly, redo that show. And, if we talked continually about what happened just from what we had at that point, you could easily add another hour.
Yeah.
This story has been, very encompassing, but it really shows you the depth of the deep state and its control and its subversion that it goes about, and how the actors within it and that behave on their behalf do not care whatsoever about breaking the law. It's just standard procedure because Trump is too dangerous for what they want. Trump is the only beacon in the North American continent that there's going to be a pushback against this. And he might have been the only person that could ever do it. So we don't know.
We don't know.
But yeah, some great stuff happening there. Let's go on to the last thing that we want to talk about at the top of the news stack here, and that is some change arounds in the cabinet for Trump.
Yes, we love talking about the constantly shifting positions in the Trump administration. This week, the person who's out and has been voted off the island is VA Secretary Shulkin. Who is in is Admiral Jackson. Now, President Trump announced Wednesday that he will be replacing Secretary of Veterans Affairs David Shulkin with Rear Admiral Ronnie Jackson, who currently serves as the White House physician and has served in that position since 2013 under both President Obama and President Trump. The move comes after Shulkin has been criticized by members of both parties for improperly accepting Wimbledon tennis tickets in February and having taxpayers pay for his wife's trip to Europe. Shulkin has agreed to reimburse the government for more than $4,000 in that one particular case. Shulkin is also the only Obama administration official that was still serving in Trump's cabinet. We also have a statement here by Representative Mike Coffman, who's a Republican from Colorado, saying that Shulkin, quote, had done nothing to clean up the culture of the bureaucratic incompetence that has defined the leadership at the VA. So, Trump's made a lot of progress with the VA. One of the first major bills that he signed into law of his administration was helping to fix the VA and being able to fire bad employees that were working for the VA there. But the fact that through that entire process, the guy who was in charge was the same guy that was in charge. It was still Shulkin. And so this is a guy that had to go, and I'm glad that he's gone. And, a lot of people are criticizing President Trump for picking Admiral Jackson because they're saying, oh, you're picking your own physician to do the job. Well, it's not Donald Trump's physician. It's the White House physician who, the guy's had the job since 2013. He served two different presidents, two completely different sides of the aisle, and the guy's done a great job. He knows what he's doing, and if Trump thinks he's a pretty good candidate, then I think he's a pretty good candidate too, frankly, from what I've done my research on him.
Yeah, this is a change around that was needed for a long time. The VA is one of the most corrupt bureaucratic institutions that we have in the federal government. They don't do a good job with what they're tasked to do. And as you said, this goes back to what we saw Trump do early on in his administration, working on, it was the VA Health Reform and Whistleblower Act, I believe it was.
I think that was the right title.
Yeah, it was the VA Oversight and Whistleblower Act. And, that was a bill in regards to firing people and getting rid of the, times of review that you need, being able to fire these people immediately. And in, kind of a sense to fully introduce that policy and make that a culture, you need to cut off the old head of the VA. In a symbolic sense, it ultimately led to his expulsion. Mm-hmm. And, he was someone that was, abusing his position. It's someone that needs to go. So hopefully it'll be run better at this point.
I think so.
Let's go on now to some economic news. The first thing we got here is some numbers on GDP revisions. These are always fun to get, and some pretty good numbers here.
Yeah, very good numbers. And we got several different numbers that we're going to go over here. But on Wednesday, the Commerce Department released updated economic data. The U.S. GDP growth for the fourth quarter of 2017 was revised up from 2.5% to 2.9%. Economists had estimated a rise of only 2.7%. So as you can see, we are growing faster than what the economists actually believe that we are trying to grow. The upward revision means that the economy was much closer to 3% growth that's been targeted by the Trump administration so far. Economists had also expected there to be no change in consumer spending. However, it grew at 4% compared to the early estimate of only 3.8%. So again, there you can see growth more so than what the economists think. Also, inflation adjusted gross domestic income rose 0.9%. Finally, corporate profits also grew up 2.7% compared to the prior year, indicating a healthy level of growth. So, more good economic numbers. That's been one of the few things that has been very consistent across the Trump administration is economic numbers getting better and better, or at least moving in the right direction and then expanding on those moves to be into the areas where, by any measurement, if you look at it right now, the United States economy is in a very big boom period right now. Things are going great. We've also got numbers showing that jobless claims are currently at the lowest level since 1973. In that that jobless claims have now been below the 300,000 person threshold for 158 straight weeks, which is the longest stretch since 1970. In fact, that the number of unemployment benefits is at 215,000 compared to only 230,000. That was expected. So even the jobless numbers are getting better. We've seen unemployment numbers getting better. Labor force participation numbers getting better, consumer spending type numbers, GDP growth, all this different stuff has been very consistent across the board. Great economy under President Trump so far.
Yeah, you're always aiming in, economics as far as GDP to get to the magical number of 3%. It's what people consider a strong economic, a benchmark. Mm-hmm. And, there has been a lot of doubts that Trump can fulfill as far as GDP, especially with, tax reform. All the naysayers saying this will actually, without the reallocating money, this will hurt the economy, this will tank it. That was the fears that we were talking about having to dispel for months before we got that legislation, done. And it was signed in the fourth quarter. So really, these numbers are saying this is what we were at before we even got the tax bill, passed. So, as we are currently in the first quarter of 2018, the real, measure of what we've done is, will we have seen an uptick of, confidence in the economy because we passed that legislation? Because that's what a lot of the Republican strategy for the midterms is hinged on. If it, backfires at any point, it could cost us elections.
Now, I would also like to point out that the first quarter GDP growth numbers are usually lower than other quarters.
Yeah.
That's one of the ways that just happens. So, that being said, we've seen the last few quarters has been in the, 3 point whatever down to, high 2 point somethings. Don't be surprised if at the end of this quarter, which actually didn't just end 3 months and a quarter. So technically we're in the second quarter now, but obviously we're not going to know these numbers for, at least a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
At least the preliminary number before they start doing revisions to it. Don't be surprised if it only is, 1.9% or like 2.1%. Somewhere along that range, because people will say that a slowdown in growth is indicative that this tax reform law is hurting the United States economy, that it was growing at this great rate,
and they will push it as this is the next recession coming. This is why I think it's important to break it down and show people where these numbers in the timeline matter, because it influences how politics are going to be talked about heading forward.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, 2.9, nearly 3%. It's a solid place to be. Now we got to see if we can continue on that. And I think, as you said, there's often a drop-off in the first quarter. Maybe because we've gotten it so high and these numbers are looking so good right now, we could stave off a massive drop and maybe go to 2.5, 2.6.
Which is also very possible.
And obviously it's a decline, but it can be seen with an understanding of the tax bill didn't destroy this country. A couple percent drop, or fractions of a percent dropping down, it just happens. It's all based on essentially our psychological confidence in the economy anyways. And we've been talking about these consumer confidence numbers for months and months and months, and whether people are actually correct on these numbers, it doesn't matter. They do have the confidence, and we've seen polling on the tax bill. People have faith in it. The majority of Americans believe that it was a good thing to pass at this point. That could actually influence the GDP going up just by willpower of people's perception of the economy. Which is a crazy thing to say how that actually works, but,
it does work.
Yeah. Which is why, GDP can't be your only number with tracking these things. There's other facets to watch. But, no, it's a good barometer of where things are. And it is looking good. Anything else you want to say on this topic, though?
No, I'm pretty much ready to move to the last story in economics.
Let's go to the last story in economics, then.
Which this story also has to do with the tax reform law. Now, it has been a few weeks since we've had any stories about companies giving out bonuses because of tax reform, but we have a new one this week, and that is everyone's favorite fast food restaurant chain, McDonald's. They announced on Thursday that they are expanding their education benefits program by tripling the amount of money that workers can get each year to help pay for college or trade school tuition. They also said that they are doubling the amount of workers who qualify to 400,000, which accounts for roughly half of the McDonald's workers in the United States. Crew members will be able to get up to $2,500 per year for tuition, which is an increase from only $700 prior. Managers can receive up to $3,000 per year, an increase from only $1,050. McDonald's also announced that they're setting aside $150 million over the next 5 years in order to pay for the program. So, there you go. McDonald's, 400,000 people that are now going to qualify for this program. And $2,500 per year for tuition for a crew member there. I mean, if you go to a state school like the one we've gone to, that pays for a significant portion of your tuition. Upwards of a quarter to maybe even half, depending on how you have your thing structured there.
Yeah, for a standard semester of college for me, as going to someone going to a state school. So obviously, not dealing with Ivy League numbers here. Mm-hmm. An average semester would usually cost me, I'm just talking tuition here, like maybe $4,000.
Yeah.
It's $2,500. That's more than half.
Yeah.
That really goes a long way, and this is because of legislation that we passed, and this is stuff that we couldn't even predict it happening. The fruits of the bill are being seen in ways that we could have never predicted, which is why I say, when you see stories like this, and people have gotten the sense that these benefits are being given out from the bill. Everyone at least at this point has seen all these different companies have given bonuses or hired more people. This stuff really impacts people's perception of how they see the country and how they want it moving forward. This momentum can help us electorally moving forward very well.
And thinking back to McDonald's as a specific company here, if you think about it, if McDonald's,
it sways the people working there.
I was going to say, and it says that it qualifies to now 400,000 people, which is roughly half the amount of McDonald's workers. Okay, say there's 800,000 McDonald's workers out there. How many thousand of them are not going to ever go to college and have no plans to go to college? Maybe a quarter. I'm just pulling these numbers off the top of my head. So, if you're looking at people that think about going to college in the future, or maybe are going to college and work there, that might qualify for this program, it's probably a majority of people that are even might consider it, I would say.
Yeah.
So, if you're a person who's, working at McDonald's or thinking about working at McDonald's or even works at a McDonald's, I would say check to make sure if you're eligible for this program or not, and by far definitely do it, because if they're going to be providing you with this benefit, you should be reaping it. You should be seeking those rewards. And so I'm glad McDonald's is doing this, and all I got to say is, Enzo, I'm loving it.
Most definitely, Bobby. Let's go on now to some stuff with immigration.
Open the door! Immigration!
La migra, vamos, niños!
This week in immigration.
So the first thing that we want to talk about as far as immigration this week is concerned is the battles going on in Orange County, California.
Yeah, I think before we talk about this first story here, we should give a little recent history of what's been going on in Orange County, California. So a couple weeks ago, we went over the story of that one city, Los Alamitos, that voted to get rid of their sanctuary status that the state government levied upon them.
It was the first and only at that time city to do so.
And then shortly after, a couple of other cities followed suit, and all three of those cities were in Orange County, California. And then Orange County, California itself even decided to get rid of its sanctuary status, or look to try to get rid of its sanctuary status. And before we go on here, we need to just say exactly what the whole status of Orange County is for people that don't understand or don't live in California or aren't familiar with Orange County. So the entire Southern California area, all the way from Los Angeles down to San Diego, is extremely blue, with the exception of Orange County. Now, Orange County is the area where Anaheim is, where Disneyland is, where Long Beach is, that sort of region. If you look at a map of California, you see where downtown Los Angeles is. Go south about maybe 30 miles or so, even though it's all just like one giant mass of just people and land and buildings and stuff. It doesn't really seem like you're changing cities, but you are, and you start getting into the Anaheim and Fullerton, Placentia, Brea, those types of areas. My grandmother, who coincidentally, as I was talking about, celebrated her 100th birthday today. If she were still alive, happy birthday, Grandma. She lived in that area, so I would go there visit all the time. That area is a lot more conservative in comparison to the rest of the area of Southern California there. In fact, Orange County, up until 2016, was considerably voting Republican every election cycle. And now, with demographic changes, has gone blue in 2016. Unfortunately, probably won't go back red again. But whereas the rest of the Los Angeles area is like 80-20 Democrat to Republican, the area of Orange County is almost pretty much 50-50. And in a lot of areas in there, Republicans still maintain power. It's one of the few places in Southern California there, at least on the coast, where Republicans do maintain the control. And so that's why you see a lot more pushback against the state's sanctuary policies coming out of the cities and the county of Orange County, California, is because of the fact that that is the conservative Republican area. In fact, there are several members of the House of Representatives, the United States House of Representatives, that are Republicans that are elected from districts that are in Orange County, whereas everything around there is just completely solid blue. It's just that one little pocket. Unfortunately, that pocket is shrinking, but they do still have enough power to where they are fighting back. Now, that long, big speech that I just gave, we're going to move into the first story here. And the first story is Orange County Sheriff, in response to California's sanctuary state policies that limit cooperation with federal immigration officials, the Orange County Sheriff announced Monday that it is now providing information on when inmates are going to be released from custody. Their existing Who's in Jail online database will now include the date and time of inmates' release, a move that agency officials say will enhance communication with ICE. The release date information will apply to all inmates, not just those who are in the country illegally. Unfortunately, however, the sheriff's deputies will still not be able to assist in an actual transfer to ICE agents under the state law. So pretty much what they are doing is, even though they're not allowed to ask for a person's immigration status, what they do is they post the public release dates of everybody that's going to be released from jail. Both illegal, legal, doesn't matter. Everyone's going up there. If ICE recognizes a name on that list and they say that's an illegal alien that's going to be released from jail soon, that then gives them the opportunity to go down there and pick that person up.
The second he hits the street, they just grab him.
The moment they walk out that door and they get onto the sidewalk, pretty much, they can get grabbed and picked up by ICE. Whereas before, the state sanctuary policies, ICE pretty much couldn't even be contacted by them. So it's a small thing, but it is very significant going forward.
And, I mean, you say it's a small thing, but really it is a big thing.
It's a huge thing. Yeah, it is.
It's the county by itself, surrounded in a sea of blue, fighting to maintain federal law, where all the other counties around them are rebelling against federal law. It's a strange circumstance, and it makes you wonder, will California crack down on Orange County at all?
Well, I mean, if you look at the next story that we're coming up here, there is a fight pretty much that is going on between Orange County and the state, and that is Orange County has now voted to join Trump's lawsuit against the state of California. On Tuesday, the Orange County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously in favor of joining a federal lawsuit against California's sanctuary laws. There's a statement here by conservative activist Christopher Schaefer of Torrance, California, who said that it is, quote, about time that we had more bodies like this one standing up to the lawlessness of the California state legislature. Steps like this will ensure that American lives will matter once again. So, if they say that California is the home of the resistance, well, Orange County is home of the resistance to California at this point.
Yeah. So it's a really crazy situation out there, and just knowing our listener base, after Texas, where most of our listeners come from, California is the second biggest, and a lot of our listeners are from that area. I haven't been to California, so it's hard for me to sometimes imagine all this stuff, but this is a battle people are having to go through every single day, and they don't know how the future is going to turn out for them either. So.
And a lot of the problems that are in California with illegal immigration, especially a lot of those tent cities that you might have seen videos that have popped up on the internet about, those issues are relatively new to some of those areas. I mean, I think it was the city of Fullerton, or it might have been the city of Anaheim recently. There were stories that are coming out where people were just driving down the streets with just tent after tent after tent. And I think one city even was fighting back against plans to build a tent city that was going to have some 400-something people or 400-something tents, one of the two, that was going to be established there. And these are all homeless people, and they have nowhere to go. Because the state, I think we've talked about this on the show, California, for all the talk about income inequality, California's income inequality is one of the worst in the country. I mean, you have a very rich area of Hollywood and Los Angeles and that sort of area, but you've also got people that are en masse living in tent cities. And California has, it was recently ranked as one of the worst states to live in by
quality of life.
Yeah, by quality of life. And it used to be one of the best states to live in. It used to be the place that everyone wanted to go to and flock to and live to. Perfect climate. But unfortunately, the politics and the demographics of that has changed so much to where it really is a terrible place to live. And, on the show, I've half joked about sending in the National Guard or the military to declare occupied territory, because I feel like, their government isn't doing anything to help their citizens. They're actively trying to destroy them. They're actively trying to replace the native population with Mexicans.
I mean, we were just talking last week. California has its first elected official who's a non-citizen.
Yeah, and
or not elected official, but government official.
This is just deemed as A-OK by the state government there.
What kind of government is run with people in positions of authority that aren't even part of the nation?
Yeah,
that are criminals.
And on top of that, California, let's face it. The entire reason that California is a liberal state, we have to put the blame where the blame is due, and that is President Ronald Reagan. Because him signing his amnesty, legalizing, how many million illegal immigrants was it?
3.
3 million illegal immigrants?
3 in 1986.
Yeah. Ever since then, California has been a solid blue state, and it's only getting bluer and bluer. Up until that point, it was a solid red state. Very good quality.
Which is why you can never give these amnesties.
Yeah, I mean, go back and look at any TV Land or MeTV station. You look at all these different TV shows that were made back in the 60s and 70s and stuff like that. And if you look at any of them that take place in California, it was a beautiful place to live. I mean, my dad went to high school in Southern California, in Orange County, coincidentally there. It was a great place to live. People wanted to live there, and now people are fleeing there. And, not only because of immigration issues, but economic issues as well. And they talk about how, oh, California, whenever people bring up like Texas secession, people are like, oh, California, you can't, blah, blah, blah. It's got like, the fourth largest economy in the world or something like that. And that's just because of its amount and size of people. Those people are having terrible times. And if you look at just the cost of living in that state, I mean, you can get a house in there that's like a one-story house that's got 2 bedrooms for $400,000. You come to Texas for $250,000, you can get a 4-story mansion. And it's all about different things. Gas
With
prices
lower
are more expensive
taxes.
there. Yeah, with lower taxes. Gas prices
No
are...
state tax.
Yeah, exactly. And California has state income tax, that's right. In fact, there are some sports players that have even complained about that. Liberal sports players that are like, wait a minute, I was on a team in California, I moved to a team in Florida or Texas, I don't got to pay state income tax anymore? What? This is great. My contract is worth even more now. That's just a small example. But, I think we should move to the last California story before we move on to the rest of immigration here.
Yeah.
That last story is California has actually bent the knee and responded to outside pressure and changed part of their sanctuary policy here.
For their sanctuary state.
Yes.
Policy.
California has had to issue a new guidance Wednesday, making it clear that the state and local police can and should share information about illegal aliens with the Department of Homeland Security, creating a major exception to the state's new sanctuary laws. In instances where police and sheriff's departments have information on a person's legal status, they are now required to share it, as required by federal law. However, they are still banned from asking about someone's immigration status and can't hold illegal aliens in detention at the request of ICE. State and local cops can also now respond to calls for assistance from federal officials as long as there is a state law that is also being policed at the same time. However, California deputies and officers still cannot participate in joint task forces that involve immigration enforcement, nor can they take part in programs that would deputize them to help identify and oust illegal aliens. So this is a big deal. Because one of the biggest problems that was being, the reason why there was a lot of lawsuits that were being threatened is because if people knew about their immigration status, they couldn't share it with ICE. They were banned from sharing it with us. Now they're saying, okay, fine. If you have that person's immigration status, you need to share it.
Yep.
Now, unfortunately, they still can't enforce any other immigration laws themselves, it seems. But at least they're going so far. And the entire reason they're doing that is trying to avoid the United States federal government
Pursuing them
in a court of law. Because they damn well know that they would lose that court case. As much as they like to virtue signal and, hate on the federal government and President Trump, they know that they would lose that court case. And they're trying to do that. I mean, the state is broke as it is. So,
yeah, most definitely. So, the California stuff is always crazy and important to go over. And, the front line of the immigration battle in a big sense. And, fighting these sanctuary city policies is at the apex of fighting the immigration battle. So, as I said, California is where it's always at.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go on now to some other stuff that is actually pretty substantial that happened this week, and that is Liberians are going to lose their TPS. President Trump on Tuesday decided to end the temporary protected status of more than 10,000 Liberians and has given them a 1-year wind down to leave the country. The Liberians were given the temporary protected status after a civil war in 1991, and then in 1999 were given a deferred enforcement departure by President Clinton, allowing them to continue to stay in the United States. Trump argued, quote, "Though consultation with appropriate executive departments and agencies and my advisors, I have been informed that conditions in Liberia have improved. Liberia is no longer experiencing armed conflict and has made significant progress in restoring stability and democratic governance." Now, the history with the United States and Liberia is a very interconnected one. We, the United States, established the nation of Liberia to begin with. It was started as a former slave colony that, we gave the slaves their own nation, and they kind of colonized the Africans around them there.
Wasn't that part of Abraham Lincoln's ideas?
It was something established prior to the
right.
Civil War, but many people had the idea of sending the Africans back to Africa, and they even allowed them to go so far as create their own nation, Liberia. Liberia has a constitution almost identical to us. It's kind of interesting, and one of the very few places that actually wasn't colonized by Europeans
Interesting.
because we protected them through our establishment. The only two nations through the breadth until around World War II to avoid colonization is Liberia and Ethiopia. So Liberia is next to Sierra Leone. A lot of the conflict in Sierra Leone has affected Liberia. Similar circumstances, fighting for diamonds and such. And they've had long Civil War issues. It's a very dangerous place, and the people from there are often very dangerous themselves. And we don't need more immigrants here who are not here by their own merit. We give you a year. If you are worthy of being here, you will be able to stay. And the rest of you got a temporary protected status. The first letter is T, as in temporary. So that has to end at some point.
And even if you've made a life here, you should be very thankful that you were able to do that.
Yeah.
And now it's time to go back.
Yeah. So good stuff on that. We've seen similar stuff with the temporary protected statuses. El Salvador losing theirs, and Honduras. It's an effective way of getting rid of these people. It's good stuff we see on it. Let's move on now to the next story, which is very humorous. And that is this week, Mitt Romney was doing a town hall because he's running for Senate, in Utah. So he did a town hall in Provo, Utah, and he claimed to be more conservative on immigration than Donald Trump, more of a hawk on immigration.
Does anyone actually believe him? Does anybody actually believe that Mitt Romney is more conservative on immigration than Donald Trump is? I mean, really, does anyone actually deep down believe that he's telling the truth? I really doubt it.
Yeah, what he said was he would be more of a hawk on immigration than the president, in the aspect that with his view on the DACA kids, they should not be allowed to stay in the country legally.
But would they be able to stay in the country illegally? He didn't rule that out.
Now, the thing with him was, okay, Romney probably wouldn't have given an amnesty, but he would have given them worker visas. He was, very big on giving out worker visas. And, he also had his thing on, family values don't stop at the Rio Grande back in 2012, where he was against separating families. So, if we lived in a world where Mitt Romney was the president, he would give the DACA kids worker visas, and those would just get, renewed every single time it went up on the docket. Whatever the renewal interval was, a year or 2 years or whatever, 5 years. And that you'd keep doing that until you get to the next Democrat president, and then that, Democratic president just gives these people amnesty. That's the game that he's playing. Now, what we're seeing here with him saying that he is, more of a conservative than Trump on immigration, he's trying to angle himself towards a primary battle with Donald Trump in 2020.
Using the Senate seat as a platform to run off of.
Yeah, he gets the Utah Senate seat in 2018. And, I mean, you can make a pretty big presence for yourself just making it into the Senate. And then, he garners success, he does more events, and then he runs against Trump, and he makes the case that, I'm better on him than this and this and this. But it's all just a lie at the end of the day. Okay, you can expect to see a lot of people come 2020 trying to come up against Trump in a primary from the Republicans.
John Kasich said he's thinking about doing it
John Kasich
again.
is looking to do so. There's a good chance we'll see Paul Ryan. It's not in the bag, yet. We still have a way to go, And never underestimate the whining power of Never Trump.
Mm-hmm. And
Because they're still there.
And the rich pocketbooks of Never Trump either.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of money on their side.
But, in regards, going back to this Mitt Romney story, I believe they had to release a little statement afterwards, didn't they, though?
Yes, they actually did do a correction. A spokesman later clarified Romney's remarks to the Boston Globe, ruling out support for a pathway to citizenship, but agreeing that President Obama's DACA commitment should be honored. So, he couldn't even stand by his statement. I believe this correction was given 3 hours after the event.
Yeah, something like that. It was very shortly afterwards.
Yeah. So funny how that works. But, do you publish the retraction?
I don't know.
It doesn't, it doesn't get shown as nearly as viscerally as his original statement. That's what sticks with people.
Mm-hmm. But, moving on from Mitt Romney, we've got a couple of illegal aliens here this week that have committed some very dangerous and very bad crimes. First one is one from Kansas, who's been indicted on some weapons charges. A 33-year-old illegal alien from Mexico living in Pratt, Kansas, which is just west of Wichita, was indicted on Tuesday on federal firearms charges. Claudia Rodriguez Oviedo was indicted on 2 counts of unlawful possession of a firearm by an alien illegally in the U.S. The indictment alleges that on November 8, 2017, she possessed a Remington handgun and 35 rounds of ammunition. She is currently, and this is a part where you really gotta pay attention to the story, she is also currently serving a 12-month sentence after she was previously convicted on charges of placing a fake bomb threat to an elementary school that she was working at the time. Why? Because she, quote, wanted to see what it felt like. If convicted, she faces up to 10 years in federal prison and a fine of up to $250,000 on each count. So Enzo, tell me, how does an illegal alien get a job in the middle of Kansas working as a school secretary and then call in a bomb threat on said school just because she felt like it?
And doesn't get deported.
In fact, is living off the taxpayer's dime while she serves that 12-month sentence.
While she's getting a weapons charge.
Yeah, and the weapons charge was something that happened before she went to jail, from what I believe. So this is, something that she was also doing at the same time. Granted, I believe in the Second Amendment, but we're talking about some illegal aliens here who, according to federal law, illegal aliens.
Not for them.
Democrats talk about, we want to get rid of these guns, we want to repeal the Second Amendment. But when it comes to these illegal aliens, you should have a problem with them having guns too. And I don't think the Constitution allows for illegal aliens to own guns, because it says that the people have the right to bear arms. Illegal aliens are not part of we the people, because they are not citizens of this country.
Most definitely.
So, we got one more story here.
Yeah,
so
I have the other kind of horror story that we have to talk about this week. And it's a story out of Oregon. An illegal alien from Guatemala who was twice deported, in the first time 2013 and the second 2014, was arrested after allegedly raping a young girl. Anastasio Eugenio Lopez Fabian, aged 24, was arrested after investigators determined he had sex several times with a girl younger than 14 years of age. He was charged with sexual assault and harassment. He was arrested in the parking lot outside of the courthouse after posting $25,000 for bail and is now in the custody of ICE. He's being held in a detention center in Tacoma, Washington now.
The first thing I thought of when I read this story is a couple, I forget how long ago this was. I want to say several months, which is probably accurate. The story about ICE being able to go after people in courthouses. This is very similar to the other story that we were just talking about. About once the guy gets released from jail, just, arrest him right then and there. Same thing's happening with the courthouses now. There are stories that once these people exit, it's like, we've got our guys waiting in the parking lot, and you're getting arrested. And I find it funny that he had to post that $25,000 bail, and where does he end up? Not a free man, back in custody. This time, gonna get deported, fella.
Most definitely. And if he would have just been kept out the first time, or even the second time, this wouldn't have happened.
I mean, I personally believe
You know, they talk about the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
Why aren't they fighting to stop this guy?
Don't know.
Because he's illegal.
Exactly.
He's oppressed or something.
And you know what? It's interesting. Both of these stories have something in common, Enzo.
What is that?
Both of these illegal aliens have hyphenated last names. You think there's a little coincidence there?
You gotta watch out for the hyphenated names. Never met a person with a hyphenated name that wasn't a little something weird about
Gotta
them.
be careful. Gotta be careful.
Most definitely.
Anyways.
Let's go on now to some ICE arrests that were made this week.
Yeah, there have been a couple of major ICE raids that have taken place this week, and we're going to cover two of them. The first one took place in North Texas and Oklahoma. It was a 3-day sweep, ended on Thursday. ICE officers arrested 89 criminal aliens. They were arrested, and they are from the following countries. Most of them, 59 in fact, were from Mexico. Next up was Guatemala with 12, Honduras with 8, Colombia with 3, Nigeria with 2, and then the following countries each had 1. Those were El Salvador, Laos, Nicaragua, Pakistan, and Vietnam. Now, they were arrested for the following crimes that are including, but not limited to, get these, rape, robbery, making terroristic threats, racketeering, various drug charges, assault, child abuse, firearms violations, liquor violations, and many others. One of them, a 28-year-old Mexican national, is also even wanted by the Mexican government for a homicide that occurred back in 2009. 23 of the 89 that were arrested have also previously been deported from the United States. So, Enzo, not sending their best, are they?
Not sending their best. No.
They're not sending you. They're not sending you.
They're sending people who rape, rob, make terroristic threats. You know, getting liquor violations. When you say liquor violations, it obviously means DUIs.
Yeah, essentially means DUI.
They have a big problem with that for some reason. When you look at the arrest records and the declined detainers that we used to get. You know, it's interesting for me looking at the list of countries. You got Laos and Vietnam. Now, those nations don't share a border with us.
No.
They actually have an ocean, and Pakistan, you know, to add to the list, also an Asian nation. People don't understand how many Asian illegal aliens are actually coming here. You know, it actually came out this week from the Border Patrol that just here in Texas, they, you know, south of Laredo, where the border there is, they have caught in the month of March 17 Bangladeshi nationals trying to come here illegally.
Amazing.
So, you know, when we talk about the necessity of the border and, you know, illegal aliens, we have no idea who these people are whatsoever. And that's how I've always tried to frame, you know, illegal aliens. They are unknown people here for unknown reasons.
From unknown places.
From unknown places. And sometimes those unknown reasons they're here is to make terroristic threats or to rob people. And we need to take ourselves seriously as a nation and actually enforce the laws that exist, or else, you know, more people will have to be the victim of crimes that they didn't need to be the victims of. And I think that's something worth fighting for.
Oh, definitely. But you know, you can actually run this story through the Donald Trump immigration kick off your campaign speech checklist. They're bringing drugs. Boom. Various drug charges. They're bringing crime. Boom. Everything that's there. They're bringing, or I skipped drugs. They're bringing drugs. Various drug crimes. They're bringing crime. Various crimes. They're rapists. Boom. Rape charges. Every single one fits the thing. And some, I assume, are decent people.
Yeah. And most are from Mexico. Which
Most
is why
are
we
from
need that
59
wall there.
out of 89 from Mexico.
Yeah, you can't overlook that
That's
fact.
2/3, Enzo.
It's
Two
pretty
thirds.
bad. We also have some other raids that happened this week, though, you want to get into.
Yes. The second raid took place not in Texas and Oklahoma, this time in Florida, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And instead of a 3-day sweep, this one was a 4-day sweep, where 271 criminal aliens were arrested. 253 of those were in Florida, 11 in Puerto Rico, and 7 in the U.S. Virgin Islands. 99 of those 271 that were arrested had previous criminal records for, here's some more offenses, such as this time murder, attempted murder, vehicular manslaughter, rape, aggravated assault, domestic violence, drug charges, and weapons offenses, among many others. 39 of those arrested previously deported from the United States.
It's not good.
No.
There's a lot of criminal aliens out there. And Florida has a ton of them. And, when we talk about places losing their, representatives because of illegal immigration,
Florida's possible too.
Yeah, Florida is definitely possible to be one of them. They have a very high population of illegal aliens, and that's enough to flip that state. Of all the swing states that are out there, Florida is probably the most at risk.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough call if we could hold on
personally,
to it.
of all the states that we consider swing states that Trump did win, Florida's going to be the hardest to win in 2020.
It was a narrow victory in 2016 as it was.
Mm-hmm. I will say one thing about that, though, and that is that if you can maintain the states that you did win and win them again, if we do lose Florida, you still win the election, albeit by a very much slimmer margin. Just like to point that out there.
Yeah.
The next story we have is ICE is rolling back their pregnancy release policy. That is, the Trump administration on Thursday directed ICE to no longer automatically release pregnant illegal aliens from detention. According to Philip Miller, a top ICE official, 506 pregnant women have been detained since December, and as of March 20th, there are 35 that are currently in ICE custody. All women of childbearing age are tested for pregnancy at the beginning of their detention, and ICE does provide on-site care and off-site access to specialized medical care if it is deemed necessary on a case-by-case basis. So the number one thing that this is going to fix is less anchor babies. Because instead of just letting these people go to then have kids that then qualify for welfare, which lets them be able to stay in the country in many cases, they're gone. And goodbye.
Yeah. So, very, very good stuff with what ICE is doing, even though through the omnibus bill, ICE has been handicapped to a good degree. Going on now, we got to talk about this caravan going through.
Yes, the entire namesake of the episode.
So, as you said, this is the namesake of this week's episode. There is currently a caravan of people trying to migrate from Central America to the United States illegally. They're being organized by a group of volunteers called Pueblo Sin Fronteras, or People Without Borders. It's a caravan that is intended to help migrants safely reach the United States, bypassing not only authorities who seek to deport them, but gangs and cartels who are known to assault vulnerable migrants. One of the organizers, Rodrigo Abeja, I got a little quote from him saying, quote, "If we all protect each other, we'll get through this together," Abeja yelled through a loudspeaker on the morning they left Tapachula on Mexico's border with Guatemala. They've been doing this caravan march for nearly the entire length of time it's going to take them from... Originally, they came from Honduras. About 80% of them are from Honduras. We're talking about maybe 1,200 of them at this point.
Well, they said there was about 1,500 families. Is that right?
I do not know the specifics on the number of families.
Because I've heard different numbers that have been thrown around. Some people said it was 1,500 families. Some said it was only 1,500 people. But, if we're talking about 1,500 families... that could be a crowd of, several thousand people.
Yeah.
It's just 1,500. I mean,
It's
granted,
hard
you know,
to
it's
exactly,
better.
you know, track.
It is, and that's part of the reason why this is such a big deal. Because you have this massive horde of invaders coming straight for your borders.
Oh, here, Pueblo Sin Fronteras counted about 1,200 people on the first day.
Yeah,
So there's been more people probably have gotten in the caravan. So yeah, you know, could be 1,500 families easily. But they are also having chance of, we aren't immigrants, we're international workers, and the people united will never be defeated. So there is kind of like a radical leftist strain to this. What this organization, Pueblo Sin Fronteras, this is an NGO, this is a non-governmental organization, you know, to promote illegal immigration. We saw this initially with a lot of the NGOs helping migrants from Africa, you know, illegally immigrate into the European Union. And now this is the case here on the American border. And we've seen in Europe, you know, they've lost this fight already. We are now looking at what could be a defeat if we don't do anything about this. You know, you look at the photos of this caravan, it's a giant wave of people just marching, all, you know, feeling entitled to come to this country and do as they please. You know, rules be damned, we are international workers. You know, it is very much like the book Camp of the Saints, which I've read, which is kind of a fictitious book about an instance where 1 million migrants or refugees from India come to the southern coast of France. And, you know, what we can see with this wave is that if it were to come here uninhibited, you will see more of these. Mm-hmm. That is something I feel very, very firm in my belief on, just by the nature of these NGOs. You know, where there's oxygen, they'll burn. And they'll burn all their way through to the American border if they can.
And, you know, it's very important that we label these people exactly what they are. They are not, what was the word they called themselves, international workers? They're invaders is what they're doing. They're using the fact that they have this massive group of people to essentially just walk across the United States southern border, go where they please, and then, you know, abuse the system, get on different welfare programs, try to take jobs from people. And, you know, they think they're trying to make their lives better, while at the expense it's making lives worse for everybody else. And then eventually, somewhere down the line, when a Democrat does get elected back president and all these people are legalized, all of a sudden they're citizens of a country, have voting power, and we know exactly which side they are going to vote for. That's part of the reason why the left is even supporting these people in the first place. That's the whole idea behind it. And, you know, it's unfortunate that this is allowed to happen because, you know, if you really want to take things to the place you want to go, you could say that. Do American citizens have the right to expel, use deadly force on people and trying to invade their country? If you got, you know, a group of a couple hundred good old boys at the border pointing guns at these people, would they legally have the right to shoot them? I'm legit almost asking that question. These people are trying to invade your country. Do you have the right to protect your homeland? I say yes. If you can't stop these people through any legal means, then do what you can. Granted, I'm not advocating for murder in the slightest. What I'm saying is you have to do something if the government does nothing.
Yeah, most definitely. And, you know, this is an instance where, you know, Trump really needs to act. We can't let this caravan come to the United States. As I said, if this caravan makes it, you're going to see more waves of this. You know, first it could just start with, you know, 2,000 in this wave. What's stopping 100,000 coming? What's stopping 200,000? What's stopping 500,000? And, you know, can the south of Texas and New Mexico really take, you know, the battering like this?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. You know, the communities in the border cannot sustain this massive a flow that could potentially be coming. So, you know, I mentioned the president on this, and he actually had a tweet on this caravan using the word caravan.
It's that a couple of tweets on it,
a couple of tweets. Do you want to go over them now, Bobby?
Yeah, the first one he said was, this was sent this morning at about 9 o'clock in the morning. He said, 9 o'clock Central Time, that is. He said, Quote, border patrol agents are not allowed to properly do their job at the border because of ridiculous liberal Democrat laws like catch and release. Getting more dangerous. Caravans coming. Republicans must go to nuclear option to pass tough laws now. No more DACA deal. And, that's the tweet that a lot of people have been talking about throughout the day, is the fact that he finally declared no more DACA deal. This entire time he's essentially, we know that Trump does not care what happens to DACA. He wants these people gone, just like we want these people gone. And the fact that people get mad at him every time he brings it up, he's bringing that up to make the Democrats look bad. That's the reason he keeps bringing it up. When in reality, nothing's really going on. So, we finally, I guess, we're officially taking the position that, yeah, there is no more DACA deal. DACA's ended, and once we beat this thing in the courts, these people are gone. The second tweet he did, which came at about 9:30 in the morning, said, quote, Mexico is doing very little, if nothing, at stopping people from flowing into Mexico through their southern border and then into the U.S. They laugh at our dumb immigration laws. They must stop big drug and people flows, or I will stop their cash cow, NAFTA. Need wall. The last thing he said was, these big flows of people are all trying to take advantage of DACA. They want in on the act. And it is true. A lot of these people are going to get on the DACA program as long as the DACA program is allowed by the courts to continue the way it's supposed to be continuing.
Yeah.
And once those people are on that, their parents are also going to try to get on other programs as well. I guarantee you some of those women are pregnant too. And if they give birth, once they get to the United States, guess which family just now gets benefits?
Yeah, it's important, when you're mentioning DACA, like you said, they understand that if they come here as a child, they can prey on the sympathy that a lot of Americans have towards, people that are DACA, and they will be fought for just like the 800,000 DACA recipients we already have. Like, there's nothing different, and we will continuously fight, and we will continuously abdicate unless we do not fight right now and say no. And tell our representatives and tell the president no. And, when saying that, there are things that you can do yourself right now to do so. So we are going to give some information, maybe keep note of where this is, or, we'll also have this in the description. The first thing I want to talk about is the phone number for the White House.
Yes.
So on Monday, as of recording now on Sunday, they're not open. But as of Monday morning, you can call into the White House and tell them that you want President Trump to do something about this caravan coming, that we need to stop it. Be it, calling the National Guard or the Texas Rangers, whatever it may be, he needs to act on that. So the number for the White House switchboard to tell the White House you want them to act on this is 202-456-1111. That's 202-456-1111. There is also an online form that you can send to the White House. We will leave that in the description as well. And there's also a way to contact your congressman. We will leave that in the description as well. I guess I can read off how you could contact them as well.
Yeah, you can go ahead. Might as well.
To contact the online form for the White House, it's www.whitehouse.gov/contact. And to contact your representative, it's callyourrep.co. And you just put in your address there, and it will show you who your representatives are, and their phone number, and their office. But, this is something you can actually do. We look at, how Trump has been over the course of his administration. When we get angry about things, and we make a ruckus, and we call the White House, and, when we also call our members of Congress and tell them that something is important, they do take notice of that.
They do.
A lot of people are planning on doing it on Monday. I've already sent the form in myself for the White House, but I'll be calling the White House tomorrow, and
Good.
I encourage everyone to do so. It doesn't take a lot. But yeah, with that said, do you want to move on now to some election stuff, Bobby?
Yes, I do. Go right ahead.
So the only thing that we have this week for election is we got some stuff that happened here in Texas in Harris County, which, if you don't know, Harris County is the county Houston is in. We have a circumstance of Houston County being accused of allowing non-citizens to vote. The Office of Harris County Voter Registrar, a Texas county was accused of recklessly hiding voter data for non-citizens from the public eye. The Office of the Harris County Voter Registrar is deceptively withholding information related to possible non-citizen voters, according to a new lawsuit filed by the Public Interest Legal Foundation, or PILF. The PILF is a nonprofit public interest firm that specializes in investigating election fraud and advocacy for government transparency. The suit alleges that the county office violated federal law by failing to disclose the data. Section 8 of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 allows individuals the right to request an inspection or seek copies of records related to the operational procedures for official government lists of eligible voters, according to legal experts at PILF. So, according to PILF, the group submitted a brief in April of 2015 in front of the U.S. Supreme Court that detailed a sample of 13 unique cases. That's 13 cases in Harris County where non-citizens have been able to vote. Each of these cases identify individuals who admitted to being non-citizens or refused to declare their status when applying to vote. Despite their fraudulent behavior, they are still registered and guaranteed the same voting right as citizens. So, what do you think of this, Bobby?
I think that they're not being punished enough. And I also think that if you people out there believe that those 13 cases, which, as they said, is just a sample of them.
Those were just 13 samples they were doing.
Those 13 that they randomly drew out of the hat. And every single one of them came back and said, yes, there was an illegal that voted here.
Yeah, PILF went on to say that they claim that there are actually thousands that they've discovered in, the Harris County voting system every year that they find that are non-citizens voting.
Exactly, and these are people that should not be voting. They shouldn't even be in our country. Not necessarily some, because some
could be legal residents, but you don't get to vote.
But they should not still be voting in our elections, and their voice is not equal to ours.
Yeah. So they always say on the left, the great big meme about it is voter fraud doesn't happen, doesn't exist. But here we have PILF. They went out, they got a lawsuit going on right now, and they got evidence to back it up. There's reason to believe there's massive fraud happening, and it's not just happening in Houston.
It's happening all across the country.
It's happening all over, over the course of doing this program the last year. We've done at least, 20 different stories on voter fraud. It's a big problem in this country, and, if we want a clean election come the midterms and the primaries that are coming up in different states, we need to do something about this issue. Anything else, Bobby?
No, that's really all I had to say. I'm pretty much ready to move on to the next story.
Let's move on now to the bottom of the stack news we have for this week. The first thing that we have is in regards to Mitch McConnell introducing a bill.
Yes. During a trip to his home state of Kentucky, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announced that he will be introducing a bill to legalize hemp as an agricultural commodity. Quote, I just had an opportunity to see some interesting and innovative products made with Kentucky-grown hemp, he said while speaking in Frankfort, Kentucky on Monday. Sunstrand, based in Louisville, contracts with farmers in Henry County to grow hemp as they process into a number of consumer products, including home insulation. Imagine, instead of pink fiberglass, we could use Kentucky-grown, environmentally sustainable hemp to insulate our houses. This represents just one of many uses that Kentuckians are finding for this versatile crop. He continued to say, quote, so I'll be introducing, when I get back to the Senate a week from Monday, a bipartisan bill in the Senate to continue to support this important Kentucky industry. It will be the Hemp Farm Act of 2018. What will it do, he said? Quote, first and foremost, this bill will finally legalize hemp as an agricultural commodity and remove it from the controlled substances list.
So yeah, some good stuff, some first steps towards the road of the possibility of at least federal legalization of marijuana. Someone like Mitch McConnell not showing hesitancy around hemp, something that has been in the same sphere of, controversy. It's a step in the right direction.
It is, and people forget and people remember that hemp is, you can use that for a lot of different things. I mean, there are plenty of products out there that, entire industries that could be completely destroyed or turned over if hemp is legalized and used instead of other different products. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, most definitely. Do you want to move now on to a particular article on the Second Amendment?
Yeah, we got a few things about the Second Amendment here, but we can start with the one that you've got here.
So I wanted to talk about an article, and I want to read some of an article that came out in the New York Times this week by John Paul Stevens. He's a former Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. He was in that position from 1975 until he retired in 2010. So he was involved in the Supreme Court for quite a while.
Yes, he was.
Quite a while. And the op-ed he gave for the New York Times this week is titled, "Repeal the Second Amendment." So let me get into some of the stuff here. Rarely in my lifetime have I seen the type of civic engagement school children and their supporters demonstrated in Washington and other major cities throughout the country this past Sunday. He's talking about the March for Our Lives marches. And feel free to interrupt me at any point you want to talk about this, Bobby.
Yeah, of course.
These demonstrations demand our respect. They reveal the broad public support for legislation to minimize the risk of mass killings of school children and others in our society. That support is a clear sign to lawmakers to enact legislation prohibiting civilian ownership of semi-automatic weapons, increasing the minimum age to buy a gun from 18 to 21, and establishing more comprehensive background checks on all purchases of firearms. But the demonstrators should seek more effective and more lasting reform. They should demand a repeal of the Second Amendment.
And that's where I want to interrupt right there, because they talk about how everybody wants all these background checks. Vast majority of the country wants these background checks, but when you look at the actual polling, very broad questions like, do you support increased background checks? Of course, the vast majority of people say yes. But once you start actually specifying what those policies really are, that support starts to diminish. Like when you start asking people specific questions like, do you want to ban AR-15s? Or do you want to ban high-capacity magazines? Do you want to ban bump stocks, even though technically those are now banned? The support for those types of things drops significantly. Especially when you can't define, people say, we want to make sure that people with mental illness can't get guns. Well, what do you define as a mental illness? I mean, we all know exactly what they mean by mental illness. They're going to try to define that for anyone that's a conservative. That's obviously the case.
Or does every single person that has, depression for a while and gets on medication for that, do they lose their rights to the Second Amendment? But, one in the article, he acts as though civilians calling for prohibition on semi-automatic weapons, he doesn't think that sounds like a crazy thing whatsoever. He doesn't think that's even going far enough.
No, I mean,
repealing the Second Amendment, private ownership of guns is illegal.
Yeah,
it's some radical stuff.
And
for a guy that worked to uphold the Constitution.
I mean, no, he didn't. Let's face that. No, he didn't. But they talk about how we want to ban. We don't want these assault weapons to be here. And they say, why do you need an assault weapon? Well, I mean, the answer's clear. It's, in case I'm ever under assault, right? Thank you to Austin Peterson for Senate for Missouri for giving me that little quote there. Who is also trying to, he said he wants to legalize automatic weapons and repeal the National Firearms Act. So, I'm not going to vote for him because he's still a cocky libertarian. But, if you want to go and try to legalize fully automatic weapons, go for it, bro. In fact, I'd probably vote for that bill myself because I'm just that type of person. But, it comes back to just the whole point that is the idea behind what they're trying to do. They're not trying to impose greater restrictions. Their ultimate goal is the repeal of the Second Amendment. And if possible, it is going to be impossible to actually have a full-scale gun confiscation in the United States. But, doesn't mean that they're not going to try it.
Yeah.
And once they gain power, they're going to do it. That's plainly clear.
Let me read some more of this article.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Concerned that a national standing army might pose a threat to the security of the separate states led to the adoption of that amendment, which provides that, quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a freed state and the right of the peoples to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Today, that concern is a relic of the 18th century.
Gonna interrupt again. It's unfortunate that these people that we put on the Supreme Court are supposed to be these champions and these defenders of the Constitution, yet his idea and understanding of the Second Amendment is as juvenile as every other person on the left, especially when they try to use the whole well-regulated militia. If you look at the definitions of what well-regulated meant at the time of writing the damn law, writing the amendment there, well-regulated meant in working condition, working well. The militia was the people. Just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah. Let me continue some more on this. For over 200 years after the adoption of the Second Amendment, it was uniformly understood as not placing any limit on either federal or state authority to enact gun control legislation. In 1939, the Supreme Court unanimously held that Congress could prohibit the possession of a sawed-off shotgun because the weapon had no reasonable relation to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia. During the years when Warren Burger was our Chief Justice from 1969 to 1986, no judge, federal or state, as far as I am aware, expressed any doubt as to the limited coverage of the amendment. When organizations like the National Rifle Association disagree with that position and begin their campaigns claiming that federal regulation of firearms curtails Second Amendment rights, Chief Justice Burger publicly characterized the NRA as perpetuating, quote, one of the greatest pieces of fraud, I repeat the word fraud, on the American public by special interest groups that I have ever seen in my lifetime.
We're going to continue to read the entire thing here?
There's about 2 paragraphs left.
Well, I'll just go into the next paragraph here. So he, in the next paragraph, he kind of goes into talking about how, in 2008, the ruling District of Columbia versus, in 2008, he said that both Justice Burger and others' long-standing understanding of the Second Amendment limited that ruling, but in D.C. versus Heller, they did reaffirm that there was a right to bear arms. And if you don't remember, this Justice Stevens was one of the dissenters in that case. So it shows you how much of a staunch defender of the Constitution he is there. Anyways, I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, so, he's talking about how that the NRA is perpetuating some massive fraud on behalf of special interests against the American public. But the thing is, the NRA is a special interest for the American public. It has over 5 million members. It gets all of its dues, pays for all the lobbying it does.
It's the country's oldest civil rights organization.
Yeah, this is people group advocating for issues that matter to themselves. He acts as though it is this massive propaganda scheme on behalf
if you look at the actual donations they make to congressmen, is nothing in comparison to many organizations that are out there. Yeah,
in terms of lobbying, in terms of dollars anyways, they're not even in the top 100, organizations as far as money they're putting out. We're supposed to believe that the NRA has this immense power, that sways policy, as though, these Republican congressmen that receive dollars from them don't actually hold those positions earnestly. They don't need NRA funding to have that viewpoint on guns and gun rights. But, yeah, I just, I wanted to talk about this article this week because, they always want to say, oh, we're not coming after your guns. We're not coming after your guns. This is someone that's actually finally now able to just say, yeah, we want to repeal the Second Amendment. It is about coming after the guns.
Yeah, and
you're seeing more and more people actually getting behind this. And this is someone who actually worked for the Supreme Court, in matters of the Constitution. And in his view, he doesn't see that there should even be a Second Amendment It's something else.
Yeah, and there was a recent poll that was taken by YouGov found 39% of Democrats actually want a full repeal of the Second Amendment. 4 in 10 Democrats want a full repeal of the Second Amendment. Can you imagine that?
It's some staggering stuff.
That's like 2 in 10 Americans.
Yeah.
But anyways, there is some good news in regards to what you said to the NRA. In terms of all these attacks, keep them going, because donations to the NRA have tripled since the Parkland shooting in February. So, for all you Democrats out there that want to repeal the Second Amendment and hate the NRA, congratulations, you just made them stronger than ever before. Good for them.
Yeah. Let's move on now to the last thing that we have before we're going into current year college craziness, and that is Judge Reinhardt of the Ninth Circuit Court has died this week.
He's died at the age of 87, and if you don't know who Stephen Reinhardt is, he was one of the judges on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. He was on there for nearly 4 decades. He died of a heart attack in Los Angeles, and according to Ninth Circuit Chief Judge Sidney Thomas, he said in a statement, quote, "He will be remembered as one of the giants of the federal bench." He was appointed by Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, back in 1979, became the 6th longest serving judge in the court. Was also considered to be one of the most liberal judges on the court, and he is pretty much the guy that has been a thorn in our side this entire time. In fact, in 2012, he was the one who wrote the opinion striking down California's gay marriage ban. He was also the one who wrote the 1996 opinion that struck down a Washington state law that prohibited doctors from prescribing medication to help terminally ill patients die. So he was one of those guys that wanted to keep those people alive. But ever since Trump came on the scene, this is the guy that has consistently, every single time cases have gone to the Ninth Circuit, has sided against President Trump. So you shouldn't be celebrating when your enemies die. But at the same time, you should be celebrating when your enemies die. And I, have nothing positive that I can say about Justice Reinhardt there, other than, I'm glad you're gone, dude, and we're going to replace you with a conservative justice now, hopefully. And if we actually do that, obviously that's not going to be enough to sway that court, since how liberal it is. But if we can at least get one more dissenting voice out there, that's good enough for me in going so far as to try to, do something to stop that court's overstep and overreach of power.
Most definitely. With that said, let's go on to some current year college craziness.
The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic. You're fucking a white male!
The assumption that women are naturally better caregivers is part of patriarchy.
Die, cis, scum.
You will not divide us! You will not divide us! You will not divide us! You will not divide us!
It's time for some current year college craziness.
Current year college craziness, the segment of the show where we talk about the crazy stuff that happens on college campuses here and abroad, but predominantly here because we just got the best, the very best in terms of crazy colleges. And this week we only actually have one story that we're going to go over. Sadly, I didn't really see much this week, to really talk about. But I guess it happens. But the one story that we have this week is from the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts.
I think they were on our show last week for a story as well.
I don't remember,
we
but
just
maybe
recently talked about them. I know that.
Yes. So a theology professor at the Catholic College, Holy Cross, is making some bizarre, some would even say blasphemous claims about Jesus Christ that has caused a stir on campus. Dr. Tai Seong Benny Liu, he's an Asian man, said Jesus was a drag king who had queer desires. He also claims that the Last Supper was a literary striptease and that Jesus was not a man but gender fluid. The Gospel of John professor cites the book of John in the Bible to try and back his arguments.
I don't know where in the book of John you'd possibly be able to say that Jesus was a drag queen. He was gender fluid. Someone's gonna go to hell, I'll tell you that.
Let me read some of his quotes. Maybe that will help.
Yeah, go right ahead, please.
Christ ends up appearing in a drag kingly bride in his passion, he argues. If one follows the trajectory of the wisdom, word, or Sophia Jesus configuration, what we have in John's Jesus is not only a king of Israel, but a king of the Iowa, or Jews, but also a drag king. Then he uses Jesus' crucifixion to try and show the passion of Christ was really a homosexual bonding of the Father and the Son. Quote, what I am suggesting that when Jesus' body is being penetrated, his thoughts are on his Father. He is, in other words, imagining his passion experience as a masochistic sexual relation with his own Father.
What the fuck is wrong with this guy?
It's, I'm not a religious person. It is Easter today, but it does seem like some very, very offensive things to be saying.
It seems that, God kind of changed things from the Old Testament to the New Testament in terms of striking down people, but I'll tell you, if the lightning bolt came down and struck Mr. Liu and got rid of him, I'd probably look the other way and not really say anything, because this guy... What is wrong with these people? How the hell is this guy a theology professor at a Catholic university, claiming Jesus was a drag queen, he was gay, he was thinking about all these things with, sexual relations with his own father? Where do they find these people?
I have no idea.
Why are these people allowed to exist? God.
It's very strange. Let me continue on this a little bit, since this is the only story, though. Liu also suggested Jesus was trying to get his followers to join in. The controversial professor uses the example of Thomas after the resurrection, putting his finger in Jesus' side, which the New Testament scholars argue was an example of John asking his readers to, quote, to perform a kind of pan-exorcism. And the Last Supper... Eroticism. I'm sorry. Said the wrong word there. In the Last Supper, when Jesus washed his disciples' feet, was a, quote, seductive literary striptease and a womanly/slavish task used as an example of John's transgender interpretation of Jesus, the professor claims.
I don't even know what more I can even say about this guy here.
Yeah. It's some weird stuff.
God, this article just keeps going and going and going with this guy saying stuff like that.
Yeah, it only gets crazier as he goes on. Transgender Jesus, who was in a homosexual relation with God, and he performed a seductive striptease at the Last Supper for his disciples that he wanted to get it on with. According to this doctor of theology.
Doctor
of theology. And, this is, it always goes to show when we talk on the show about career college craziness, some of the dumbest people are very smart people.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is a doctor, and he believes absolutely retarded things,
Just because you're educated doesn't mean you're smart.
Yeah. And that's the moral of the story on this segment every week. But, apologies, this is the only story that we have for Career College Craziness this week.
You're going to have some weeks where there's not that many stories.
Most definitely. And a lot of colleges have actually been on spring break this week.
That's true. A lot of northern colleges tend to take their spring break later.
That was the case in Missouri this week. I was, in Kansas City. Let's go on now to the final segment of the show, though, and that is international news.
Yeah, we actually have some both good and bad information coming out from internationally, but the first stories that we have up are out of Asia. So, Enzo, how about you start us off here with some news out of China?
So, the first thing that I wanted to get into is this week, China has announced the creation of the Petro Yuan. The yuan is their currency in China, if you are unaware. And this will help Russia and China to dump the U.S. petrodollar for oil trade. So what the petrodollar is nations require, nations such as OPEC nations, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the works, they require oil to be traded in U.S. dollars. Thus the term petrodollar has come about. But as of now, China is moving to create the petro yuan to create an agreement between Russia and China to start reducing their payments in dollars and move over onto this new currency. There's a settlement on Russian oil deliveries to China, which is upwards of around 60 million tons per year of oil, and all of this will now all be done without the use of a dollar whatsoever. So this really is a work to strategically take away hegemonic global capitalistic power from the United States and put it in the hands of the Chinese.
So you know what? It's very unfortunate that they got to do this, because if you remember back, people have used the whole excuse of why did we invade Iraq? Why did we, launch the war in Libya? It is true, and those two countries did try to not follow the whole petrodollar standard. So, frankly, at this point, I'm not really sure if this is going to negatively or positively affect us. I mean, it's obviously going to negatively affect the global oil market if you're going to start having countries not be trading on U.S. dollars. But, it's just one of those things where, foreign countries have the right to do whatever they want. I firmly believe that. But at the same time, we have control over something. We might as well maintain it. And so I'm going to go ahead and, for this one, maintain relatively neutral on it, although I would say that it's probably not going to help us at all.
On the very first day of trading for the petro yuan, $4 billion worth of petro yuans were traded. So there is interest in this stuff. We can move on, though, to another Asian country and its connection to the United States economically. And this is actually some good stuff.
Yeah,
this is
very good stuff.
Steel tariffs and South Korea. Seoul and Washington are hailing an agreement to revise their free trade deal as a win-win after South Korea agreed to further open its auto markets, and the Trump administration said it would not impose steel tariffs on the country, the third largest exporter of steel to the United States. South Korea would have to limit steel exports to 70% of the current levels as part of the deal, which has been agreed to in principle. The agreement removes the cloud of trade-related doubt that has been hovering over South Korea since President Trump came to office threatening to rip up job-killing free trade deals between the allies. And then here's a quote from the Trade Minister of South Korea, Kim Kyung-chung. He said, quote, "The best result from a negotiation is when both sides leave the table feeling like they didn't get everything they wanted. If the result is too lopsided in favor of one side, there might have to be a renegotiation later." But he says that he hopes there will be no need for renegotiation in the future.
And if you're wondering what the U.S. has to do as part of their part in the negotiation, under the revised agreement, U.S. automakers will be actually allowed to export 50,000 vehicles a year to South Korea, which is double the current existing quota. And also, they will have to meet only American safety standards and environmental standards, not just the South Korean ones. So, by them limiting their steel exports to the United States in exchange for us being able to expand our cars that we export to South Korea, it is a win-win. And it's going to benefit both countries. And
it reduces our trade deficit with South Korea.
Exactly. And if you're wondering, our trade deficit with South Korea last year was $18 billion, which is actually down from 2016 when it was at $23 billion. So it is trending in the right direction, and hopefully we'll be able to close some of these gaps. And, the economy and the markets kind of went down a little bit when there's fear of these trade wars. But as stories like this keep coming out that countries are actually willing to negotiate with us over these different trade deals, it's actually showing that it's working out very, very well, and Trump knows what he's doing here.
Yeah. Moving on, let's talk about some stuff with South Korea's neighbor to the north, North Korea, and the negotiations for peace with them. You want to talk about that, Bobby?
Yeah, this story that we're about to talk about has the potential to probably be one of the most important stories of the year if it can actually get accomplished. And that is, China is claiming that Kim Jong-un has agreed to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. So if you don't know, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, he visited China on Sunday and met with Chinese President Xi. It was Kim's first known journey abroad since 2011, and also it's in preparation for the upcoming South Korea and United States summits that are happening there. And, Trump said that he's going to be meeting with Kim Jong-un here soon, I believe at this summit. So, the fact that North Korea's missile programs, they haven't done any more tests. Kim Jong-un is starting to talk about the fact that he is open to, talks and even denuclearization. And all of this is stemming from President Trump's leadership and President Xi's leadership and the cooperation and agreement that them, along with the South Korean president, have all done together as part of this entire process. So, this is one of those things where if other things don't necessarily work out for Trump's agenda, one of the things where hopefully he'll be able to actually say he accomplished something good was finally dealing with the North Korean situation, because it looks like we have a very good chance of actually solving it right now.
Most definitely, and it would definitely help Trump and his approval ratings if he was able to negotiate such a historic and presidential moment of peace, in North Korea. So, I don't have anything else on that. You want to move on to another continent? I don't know what you want to go on to next.
Next up, we're going to the Middle East, and then we're going to Europe after that.
Okay.
I just forgot to reorder these things.
Let's get into the Middle East. So the first thing that we want to get into is Trump's had some stuff to say about Syria this week that I believe we're both pleased to hear.
Yeah, President Donald Trump has made a surprise announcement that U.S. forces will be withdrawing from Syria, citing the defeat of ISIS and the need to defend U.S. borders and rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. Quote, "We are coming out of Syria very soon. Let the other people take care of it now," Trump said during a speech in Richfield, Ohio on Thursday, which was a speech that he was giving dedicating to his infrastructure initiative. So essentially, during the speech he went on and he said a couple of quotes like, quote, "We build a school, they blow it up. We rebuild the school, they haven't blown it up yet, but they will. Is there something a little bit wrong with that?" he asked the crowd. And he went on to say regarding Syria, he said, quote, "We're there for one reason, to get ISIS and get rid of ISIS and go home. We're not there for any other reason, and we have largely accomplished that goal." So, we've talked about this, how ISIS essentially has been defeated in Iraq and Syria. There's still pockets in areas, and there's still pockets in other countries around the world. They still pose a grand threat to countries all over the world. Let's not kid ourselves here, but their territory, they've lost almost 100% of their territory now. They've essentially been defeated in both Iraq and Syria. So our mission there is done. And the fact that Trump's saying, "You know what, guys, prepare to come home because you're coming home." That's the first time I've heard the president actually tell people to prepare to come home instead of just saying, "I promise bringing people home" in a very, very long time. It looks like we're actually about to get out of a war.
Which is great as opposed to the alternative of staying in Syria and continuing to destabilize the country and to continue to advocate for regime change in Syria, which will only bring about more violence and instability.
So hopefully that actually happens. Obviously there's no timetable there, but I'm going to hold your feet to the fire there, President Trump. I want our boys back home.
Most definitely. Moving on now to some stuff out of Israel we want to talk about. And that is some border clashes on the Gaza-Israeli border. Thousands had marched to the border at the start of a 6-week protest march, the Great March of Return. I believe there was, yes, and the first day of these protests was, I believe, 2 days ago.
And this was where the border on the Israel and Gaza Strip, I believe, right?
Yes, on 5 different locations on that border. On the very first day, they had an instance of 17,000 Palestinians come up to the border between the two states, and many of the individuals had passed the enclosed-off military zone that the Israeli military puts out there, and Israeli troops opened fire. At least 16 have been killed in the border clashes, and more than 400 have been reported wounded as of this point. Yeah, not the best stuff. You don't particularly want people to be dying in, protest instances. There was some fears by the Israelis that with the amount of people there, thousands upon thousands, there's going to be a mad rush to, breach the border. But I don't know. You don't want instances where hundreds of people have to be shot, obviously.
No, of course not.
But yeah, this is part of, as I said, the Great March of Return. The protests started, as I said, 2 days ago on March 30th, and they'll be continuing to protest till May 15th.
Yeah, they're expecting those protests to get over 100,000 people.
Yeah, so, the classes have just started this weekend, but there's going to be more.
It's going to continue. More people are going to die, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. So, that's going on in the world, and you need to be aware of that.
Let's go to Australia next, just to.
We weren't going to do Australia. Remember?
Oh yeah, that's right. My bad.
So we're going to close out this week with some European news, though. What's the first thing we have for Europe?
First thing we have up is some new numbers regarding London's murder rate, and that is that the murder rate for the first time in London has beaten New York City, and a lot of that has to do with the increase in knife attacks. They said that in March, according to the British publication, there have been 22 killings in London versus 21 in New York. Now, if you're wondering about actual rate of things, there's about 8.7 million people in London and about 8.5 million people in New York City. And then if you add just the general metropolitan areas, they're roughly the same size in terms of number of people. But the actual cities have almost identical numbers of people. And so the fact that there was 22 killings in London, 21 in New York, the rate for the first time ever of London is a lot higher. They've said that the actual murder rate in London has risen by 38% since 2014. That is definitely not good. And if you're wondering just how far it has come over history and historical times, there's FBI data and crime studies that show that since 1800, London has typically had a murder rate per person of between half of a person in New York City. So, definitely not very good there at all.
Definitely not. There was actually another instance of mass crime in Germany this week that we didn't actually have on the docket. But
was there?
If you were good, I would actually like to talk about it as well.
Yeah, go right ahead.
There was actually this week, on Thursday, this happened, in Duisburg, Germany. There was an instance where they actually had to declare a state of emergency.
Interesting.
60 men armed with machetes and metal pipes broke out into a street battle in the city center of Duisburg. The police had to be called, and then they used CS gas to control the situation. Around 50 people were arrested, and what the police officials told the newspaper there, that the fighting there was between three rival gangs of Turks, Lebanese, and Kurds. So we're seeing, and think about these regions, especially Turks and Kurds. They hate each other. Mm-hmm. They hate each other. We have an instance now where with the migrant crisis, we have all these people that still have their ethnic hatreds of each other from their homeland, and they're bringing it to the streets of Europe. Mass battles in cities in Germany because they didn't keep these people out. That these people don't need to be there. They're not doing anything productive.
Not supposed to be there either.
No. But I just wanted to bring that up. That was something that I noticed that we didn't have on the show.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up.
But do you want to move on now to some statistics you wanted to get into?
Yes, and these are some statistics that if you're the type of person that really likes to be updated with statistics, you are going to love these. So, a massive poll covering 28 countries in the European Union was conducted by the Zazadveg Foundation's Project 28, finding that 78% of all Europeans believe that illegal immigration into their countries is a problem. What's more, the poll revealed that more citizens in every single European country say that it is a serious problem than say that it is not a problem or not a very serious problem. So that is very, very important, the fact that we are having pluralities and majorities in these polls. There's some other data that they say here that I want to get into here real quick. 68% say that they either strongly fear or moderately fear the prospect of African migrants arriving en masse into Europe over the next decade. 70% believe that a growing Muslim population that a growing Muslim presence is a problem, compared to only 8% saying that it isn't a threat at all. So 70% say it's a problem, 8% say it's not a problem. Those numbers definitely in our favor there. 57% said the influx of immigrants will change the culture of their countries. 73% said that managing immigration will pose a huge financial burden on their countries. Only 17% believe that the cost of handling immigration will not be huge. So, these people, they understand exactly how their economies are going to be affected by these migrants coming into their countries. Yeah. And the final couple stats that we have here, only 24% of people believe that Brussels has done a better job in handling the crisis than Central and Eastern European nations who have repeatedly pushed back against the European Union's policies. Only 24% of Europeans think that the EU is handling the migrant crisis better than countries like Poland and Hungary and Romania.
Yeah. So yeah, very, very telling, statistics on the viewpoints of Europe and Europeans. It's similar to the stuff that we saw with the Harvard-Harris poll here in the United States.
Yeah.
This is stuff that us Western people are feeling, currently, to a very great degree, and we're made to feel like our viewpoints aren't mainstream, that we are radical, far right, but this is what most people feel.
Yeah.
When
people are actually able to voice their opinion and truly say what they believe, you realize the vast majority are like, yeah, I don't want this to be happening. This is causing problems, and I don't think it's going to get any better.
Yeah. Let's move on now to some stuff from Pope Francis.
Yeah, the final two stories here, it is Easter Sunday, so we wanted to kind of close with these final stories here. The first up is about Pope Francis, and this is your story, so I'll let you get it.
So this week, Pope Francis was doing an interview with a longtime atheist friend of his, Eugenio Scalfari, and it was an interview done for La Repubblica. And in the course of the interview, the Pope Francis goes on to say that there is no hell whatsoever. So I can read the quotes. They were translated from Italian. This is Scalfari to the Pope. Your Holiness, in our previous meetings you told me that our species will disappear in a certain moment, and that God, still out of his creative force, will create new species. You have never spoken to me about the souls who died in sin and will go to hell to suffer for eternity. You have, however, spoken to me of good souls admitted to the contemplation of God. But what about bad souls? Where are they punished? And then Pope Francis responds, quote, "They are not punished. Those who repent obtain the forgiveness of God and enter the ranks of souls who contemplate him. But those who do not repent and cannot therefore be forgiven disappear. There is no hell. There is the disappearance of sinful souls."
That doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, no, Pope Francis
is communist.
Pope Francis believes, and I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I understand what Christianity in general believes. He believes that there's no hell. Sinful people, when they die, their souls just disappear.
I'd love to see him point out where exactly in the Bible anything points to that being, anywhere near accurate.
But, yeah, this is just one of the biggest figures in all of Christianity, and this is what he believes.
It really makes me question these people again.
Let's go on to, though, our last story of the week, also related to Christianity, because it's Easter today.
And although this story is not a story that is an international story, I did want to put it together because, as you said, it is Easter, so maybe we should look at the Easter story in a different light. This time coming from a CNN article that was written by their writer, John Blake, and him telling that the biblical story of Easter is a hashtag #MeToo moment for Mary Magdalene. The CNN article by John Blake starts off by saying, quote, "The men refused to listen to her story. She was publicly smeared as a whore, and then when she emerged as a celebrated advocate, powerful men tried to silence her because she threatened their status. Nevertheless, she persisted. The woman we're talking about, though, is not a leader in the hashtag #MeToo moment, the viral campaign raising awareness about sexual assault and harassing against women. She is Mary Magdalene, the first person Jesus appeared to after his resurrection, according to the New Testament, and the first person to preach the good news that he had been raised from the dead." He then goes on to say that another comparison between Christ's crucifixion and hashtag #MeToo is the use of sexual humiliation. The person, I'm sorry, I lost track here. He then goes on to say essentially that CNN compared further the humiliation that Jesus experienced from his nakedness on the cross to, quote, "infamous photos of naked Iraqi prisoners stacked on top of one each other like a pyramid by U.S. soldiers in the Abu Ghraib prison." So yeah, Enzo, did you know that the story of Easter is actually one of the world's oldest versions of hashtag #MeToo? Because the men didn't like the fact that the woman was trying to subvert and destroy their power, but she persisted, Enzo. She persisted. And then Jesus appeared to her.
This is one of the strangest things I've ever heard someone try to claim, whatsoever. I guess strangest thing I've ever heard since, in regards to Christianity, since the last story.
Yeah.
But,
oh, there was one more I could have included here. It was another article, I believe this one was also CNN, talking about how Christianity does nothing but defend white supremacy, but, they used a picture of the KKK and that, so, that shows you how far CNN's willing to go to smear their opponents.
But, yeah, Mary, Me Too with Jesus on Easter.
Apparently she got Me Too'd by John and Paul there.
Yeah, the men didn't believe her. It was the Israeli patriarchy, I guess. Ancient Judaic patriarchy. I don't know. It's so weird.
See, it's funny
because it's really reaching.
Because if you actually read the story, once Mary, once she discovered that, oh, Jesus ain't here no mo', she ran back to tell the guys, said, hey, Jesus' body's gone. And you know what they did? Once they were like, uh-oh, we should go investigate this, they literally ran there. In fact, one of them outbeat the other guy, because the other guy was older and slower. Why would they literally run there if they didn't actually believe her? They wanted to see for themselves.
Yeah.
Not a Me Too moment. If anything, it's a, oh my God, are you serious? Let's go.
Yeah.
Happy Easter, Enzo.
Happy Easter, Bobby. But, yeah, that's the show for the week. I don't know how long we went.
Depending on, this is going to be edited, so, we might have to re-record part of the beginning. But what you're listening to, if you're a person who is listening to this, you'll be listening to a perfectly normal episode, so.
Yeah. But, I think we had a pretty good, concise show this week. We went over a lot of different things, and, I don't know. I'm interested to see where all these developments we talked about this week are going, as Absolutely. I do every single week. But with that said, do you have anything else you want to say, Bob, before we go?
The only things I would like to say is, remember, we do have a Patreon, and the link to that is in the description of this podcast episode here. So if you do want to support the podcast, that is the best place to go and do it. And we would absolutely appreciate it if you did that. Also, be sure to follow us on our various social media profiles. We are on Gab at Trump_Republic_radio. We're on PewTube. We're on YouTube. If you're listening, please like and subscribe to this video. That would be freaking awesome. And if you're on YouTube and you do subscribe, be sure to hit that little subscribe subscription bell. Therefore, you get notifications every single time that we go live on the show. It'll pop up and you'll never, ever miss it. Unless YouTube keeps changing their policies and screwing things around, in which case you might miss it, but that ain't our fault. My hands are clean.
Yeah, with that said, we just want to thank you for listening to another episode of Trump Public Radio, and have a good one.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.